The NHL draft is an exciting time of the year where we get to see the league's future stars putting on their new team's jerseys for the first time. It's an exciting time for both teams and fans because they get to have hope for the future that they have just drafted a future star player. Most of the focus, however, is on the first round of the draft, where we see many generational and franchise talents been drafted. These players usually have a lot of media attention and have been heavily scouted by many people. However, not every star player has been drafted in the first round, and oftentimes many of them have been drafted in the later rounds of the draft. My name is Grant Talks Hockey, and today I'm going to be counting on the top 10 7th round draft steals since the year 2000. Starting off with number 10, I have Justin Braun, who was drafted 201st overall by the San Jose Sharks in the 2007 NHL entry draft. Justin Braun was drafted out of UMass and would then make his debut 5 years after he was drafted. Justin Braun has been a very reliable shutdown defenseman for his entire career and has spent 722 games in the National Hockey League split between the Sharks and the Flyers. In those games, he has scored 28 goals and added on 151 assists for a total of 179 points. He's been a very reliable defenseman up to this point, however, just not a superstar. Moving on to number 9, I have Victor Olefson, who was drafted 181st overall by Buffalo in the 2014 NHL entry draft. Olofsson was drafted out of Modo, the Swedish Elite League, and would end up spending the next 5 years outside of the NHL, split between Modo and Frölunda, the Swedish League, and a year in the American Hockey League. Olofsson is a very talented offensive winger who's played 116 games in the National Hockey League so far, and in those games he scored 35 goals and added on 43 assists for a total of 78 points. Olofsson is still very early on in his NHL career so far, but he has shown a lot of potential and talent that proves that he could potentially be a top 6 winger with a lot of offensive upside. I do like Olofsson's game a lot, and it's a very good pick for Buffalo, who hasn't had tons of success in the draft. Moving on to number 8, I have Ryan Dzingel, who was drafted 204th overall by the Ottawa Senators in 2011. Ryan Dzingel would play his draft year for the Lincoln Stars and would then go on to Ohio University, where he would end up being a Hobey Baker finalist in his final season there. After that, he spent a few seasons in the American League and would end up making his NHL debut 5 years after he was drafted. Dzingel has played 372 games up to this point, split between the Senators, Hurricanes, and Blue Jackets, and in those games he scored 82 goals and added on 98 assists for 180 points. Dzingel is a solid goal-scoring winger who has struggled with consistency in the past. However, he has always proven that he's been the best in Ottawa, and now that he's there, I think he could definitely be a part of this young core going forward and help be a bit of a veteran presence in the locker room, although he's not that old, but compared to most of the team, he is one of the older players. I do like Dzingel's game, and for a 7th round pick, the Ottawa Senators definitely struck gold here. Moving on to number 7, I have Anton Stralman, who was drafted 216th overall by the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2005. Anton Stralman would play in Timrå of the Swedish Elite League for 2 seasons and would make his NHL debut in his Draft Plus 3 year. Anton Stralman up to this point has 856 games split between the Leafs, Blue Jackets, Rangers, Lightning, and Panthers, and in those games he scored 55 goals and added on 215 assists for 270 points from the blue line. Throughout his career, Anton Stralman has been a very capable and consistent top 4 NHL defenseman, and that is all you could really ask for a 7th round pick, is longevity. Moving on to number 6, I have Dominik Kubalk, who was drafted 191st overall in 2013 by the Los Angeles Kings. Kubalk would play his draft year for Sudbury and would end up going to the Czech League and then the Swiss League. He'd make his debut 7 years after his draft year with the Chicago Blackhawks. So far, he's played 124 National Hockey League games, and in those games he scored 47 goals, which includes his 30-goal rookie season, and added on 37 assists for 84 points so far. While Kubalk is still very early on in his NHL career, he's already proven to be a very solid goal-scoring winger, and for someone drafted this late and taken this long to develop, it's definitely been worth the wait. Unfortunately not for the Kings, but the Hawks have definitely gotten a solid player here. Moving on to number 5, another 2013 draft pick, this time is Mackenzie Weegar, who was taken 206th overall by the Florida Panthers. Weegar would play his draft year in Halifax. That's on the same team with McKinnon and Drouin. And after that, he would move on to the American League and would end up making his NHL debut 4 years after he was drafted. So far with the Panthers, Weegar has played in 226 games and added on 19 goals and 58 assists for 77 points so far as a defenseman. Weegar has been a very solid defenseman so far, and the offensive upside is definitely starting to come through for him. Weegar is a very good defenseman who could potentially be a top pairing defenseman at the National Hockey League level. He's already played in that role, especially after Ekblad went down with injury, and he proved that he can play the top pairing minutes. And getting a top pairing defenseman in the 7th round is a massive steal, but there hasn't been enough time so far in his career to move him up in the list, so that's where we move on to number 4, current Florida Panther, Patrick Hornqvist. So far, Patrick Hornqvist in his career has played in 814 games split between the Predators, Penguins, and Panthers, and in those games he scored 252 goals and added on 260 assists for 512 points. With the Penguins, Patrick Hornqvist won 2 Stanley Cups, and he's been a very big playoff performer throughout his National Hockey League career. Hornqvist has always been a solid net front presence, and has had a very good career, in getting a top 6 winger like Hornqvist, the longevity that he's had that late in the draft was an absolute steal. Moving on to number 3, I have Ondrej Palat, who was drafted 208th overall by the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2011. Palat would spend his junior hockey in Drummondville of the Quebec Major Junior League, and would then make his debut only 2 years after his draft year, which is very impressive for a 7th round pick. So far, Palat with the Lightning has played in 551 games. He has scored 125 goals, added on 249 assists for 374 points up to this point. Palat has been a very solid top 6 winger for the Lightning, and has been a very consistent player. He's also won 2 Stanley Cups, and the Lightning has been one of their key players, and getting into 7th round was a great selection. Moving on to number 2, I have Joe Pavelski, who was selected 205th overall in 2003 by the San Jose Sharks. Pavelski plays junior hockey with the Waterloo Blackhawks, and then moved on to Wisconsin, and eventually would make his NHL debut 4 years after he was drafted. Pavelski has played in 1,086 games up to this point between the Stars and the Sharks. Pavelski so far has scored 394 goals, added on 449 assists and 843 points, and has been a 4-time 30 goal scorer, including one 40-goal season. Pavelski has been a very clutch playoff performer and has gone to 2 Stanley Cup finals, unfortunately has not won a cup yet. Pavelski is one of the players that comes to mind when you think of a 7th round draft steal, and has been one of the better players throughout the 2010s. Moving on to number 1, I have Henrik Lundqvist, who was selected 205th overall by the New York Rangers in the 2000 NHL entry draft. Lundqvist would make his debut 5 years after he was drafted in the 05-06 season, and would play in 887 games throughout his NHL career. In those games, he'd have a record of 459, 310, and 96, finishing with a 2.43 goals against average and a .918 save percentage, and would also have 64 shutouts. Lundqvist would have a Vezina and the Cup Finals appearance, and more impressively would only miss the playoffs 3 times throughout his entire NHL career. Lundqvist was the backbone of the Rangers for many seasons, and is, in my opinion, a lock for the Hockey Hall of Fame. Lundqvist probably ends up being the only Hall of Famer on this list, however there are a couple players who could challenge that. Henrik Lundqvist is probably one of the most famous 7th round draft steals, and the Rangers absolutely struck gold here with a fantastic selection, who would end up being their franchise piece for many, many years. As we've seen, the 7th round of the draft isn't all doom and gloom, and you can even find potential Hall of Fame talents in the 7th round. While it isn't as likely, diamonds in the rough do occur, and I'm sure we're going to see many more 7th round draft steals in the future. If you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think. I know there's players I left off for various reasons, and I'm sure there's going to be disagreements. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out.